Welcome to Free Exchange. I'm Howard Wall, Director of the Hammond Institute. And joining us today for a second time is Tim Jones, who is the outgoing Speaker of the House in the state of Missouri. Thanks for joining us again, Tim.
Thank you for having me back.
Now, some people might already know, is that you'll be joining the Hammond Institute as a Senior Policy Fellow in January, and we're very excited about that.
I'm very excited about the new career path I'm charting.
Right,
yes.
and the St. Louis metro area might be excited to have you back, because instead of working on state issues, maybe you can help out figuring out some more local issues. And
plenty to work on here, that's for sure.
The big issues in St. Louis are schooling, which I guess is also a big issue statewide, but also the regionalism. You know, St. Louis has so many municipalities and school districts, and the city and the county are not in the same county, and there's talk about joining them together back into one county. What are your views on that? Sort of this overall regionalism.
Incredibly complicated issue, and it was created over the last 2 centuries, basically. You know, when Missouri was first settled back in the early 1800s, when the state was chartered in 1821, this was a extremely rural part of the country. You know, it was one of the first states with the Louisiana Purchase, and Lewis and Clark, of course, started here in St. Charles and headed west. And this was a wild land, and so people had to be very parochial back then. They had to take care of, every little community had to take care of itself, had to establish its own means of subsistence. Well, over the years and decades and centuries, that has led to a great amount of fragmentation in our area, and a loss of, I think, regional cooperation to an extent. And so now we have to sort of decide what's next for the next century for Missouri, for St. Louis County, for the region. I think when I tell people some of these numbers, they're gonna go, oh yes, there's an issue that needs to be addressed here. We have 91, 92 municipalities in St. Louis County, which is overall not a gigantic region such that it would need 92 municipalities.
Oh, and some of them have populations 200-300.
Correct. We have 522 school districts across the entire state of Missouri, 114 counties. We have, I think, somewhere around 300 some odd fire districts across the state. So we've got all this fragmentation in services. Well, guess what that means for the voters and for the citizens? Every single one of those entities are a taxing entity. School districts have the power to tax. Fire districts have the power to tax. Cities, counties. Municipalities have the power to tax, and everybody wants their own fiefdom. Everybody wants their own kingdom. Everybody wants their own stuff. And so you have a lot of duplication of services. You know, nowadays with technology and the advancements in everything from the education system to fighting fires to law enforcement, you wonder if a municipality of a couple hundred people needs 15 to 20 full-time police officers, complete with squad cars and everything else. And
right.
So some areas have taken it upon themselves to go ahead and reduce that duplication of services. Many municipalities now are working together, which is good. The problem is there's no overall concerted effort to do something about this massive fragmentation. Now, other side of the coin, people would argue local control. And that's fine as long as that local control is not merely designed to increase your taxes and provide duplication of services that really aren't necessary.
Well, so my take on this is also, it's similar. There's a trade-off for sure. But many of the large cities are perfectly well run. I live in Baldwin, which is seemingly pretty well run, and it's surrounded by pretty well run areas. But it is these smaller municipalities where there's, you know, they have real problem with competence level.
Yes.
In the police force, if they have their own police force, and just in how they're governed. You know, their board of aldermen, there's always elected officials.
A lot of them have been in the news lately.
And a lot of them get into the news, especially in the very small ones, and are arrested
in a bad way.
Because it's just ripe for graft, which is more difficult to occur in some of the larger cities.
Right.
And by large, I don't mean, you know, hundreds of thousands, but, you know, 20,000, something like that. But I agree, these cities, and I'm from New York, we don't call anything cities except there's only a few cities.
Boroughs.
But here they're all cities that are so small, are just unsustainable. But on the other hand, some competition is good. Right. Competition can work to make sure that at least some places are being run well. And if you are running your place, your city poorly, then people will leave, and then they'll go to a place that's run better.
Right.
The problem is that you're not necessarily caring that people are leaving. If your objective is not to maximize the welfare of your citizenry, and it's, say, to take advantage of graft and keep your own stuff, then you're not really that worried about people leaving, except in your own bottom line.
And no one has argued that we need to take the entire St. Louis County metro area and make it one city. I think people...
I don't know that no one has argued
well,
that.
Well, maybe some have. I think the problem people have is, as you've pointed out, there is no rhyme or reason to the size or the population level of the 92 municipalities we have. We have cities like Baldwin, Chesterfield, Wildwood, who have 20, 30, 40,000 individuals. Then we have some cities in various parts of the county. Some are in West County like Winchester. Others are in North County like Charlock or Kinloch, who have 200 or 300 people in them. And it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever that there would be municipalities right next to each other in the same county, in the same type of area, that have a city of 200 people sitting next to a city of 20,000 people. So I think people feel there needs to be a little more sense made out of our governmental area. And it's very unique to the St. Louis region. If you look at the rest of the state of Missouri, in fact, there's not this massive fragmentation the way there is in the St. Louis County region. So St. Louis County, I think, has a lot of work to do in the consolidation area, and some of it has happened because of the recession. The recession that we've gone through, and many feel we're sort of still at the tail end of, has required some cities to consolidate or to one or two cities have de-incorporated and gone back into the county because they realized there was no budgetary region for them to exist.
Yeah, and it's an interesting situation because there's the county police department, and cities can get protection from the county police and not have their own police department, which seems like a great option. And a lot of cities still do not do that. Ones where it seems like they ought to. And I mean, there are problems. This is related to it's come to the fore with the problems in Ferguson.
Yes.
That there are cities that seem to exist only as traffic ticket collection bureaus.
Right. Some of these cities, you're correct. If you look at their budgets, they only exist because of the fact they are able to set up a speed trap on a major interstate highway.
Right. And that seems like not a very good reason for a place to exist.
No, there should be better government models than that. I agree.
Yeah. Now, other things that touch on this, actually, education is, as I said, is also very important. And there was an article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch the other day about a group. The headline was promising, but then the article itself was depressing.
As often with our local paper.
But the headline was, a group proposes erasing school district borders, which I've read wrongly to be that students would be allowed to travel across district borders to find their schools. But that was not what it was. What it was to create one giant school district that encompassed the entire city of St. Louis and St. Louis County, which I think is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard of, because you'll end up with one gigantic bad school district instead of having some excellent school districts and others really other school districts that are just horrifically bad.
Right.
And the solution to the horrifically bad ones is not to merge it all together and get one giant mediocre or bad one.
Right, and just like with the issue of too many municipalities, many have argued we have too many school districts, and this is more of a problem. You see it in the St. Louis region, but you definitely see it in rural Missouri as well, where you have a school district that has only a few hundred students in it. And so again, the state of Missouri, just to remind people, has 522 school districts, again, too many. You know, the three biggest areas of reform that we tackle every year on the state level and here on the local level as well, you can put it in three different buckets of education reform, labor reforms, and reforms with our judicial system. And education reform, I think, is the hardest one because you have a very entrenched bureaucracy. I call them educrats, you know, that basically want the state government to largely butt out. They want the taxpayers to provide them their funding to the tune of
butt out is not exact.
$8 billion a year.
The,
you know,
the part of the wallet can stay.
right?
But
The money can stay, but don't give us any advice on anything. Is basically their feeling. And just like what we said with cities, municipalities, you don't just want to go to one giant city or one giant municipality. You need that healthy competition. We don't need just one school district, but we definitely need to probably do some consolidation and do some reformulation. But I think what you have missing from our education system right now is there is no choice. Parents cannot shop around. The free market, we don't want to turn schools necessarily into big businesses, but on the other hand, you want some form of our very healthy system of competition to exist. Right now it does not. And so the failing school districts are just left to fail. The healthy school districts are just left to succeed. Who loses? The kids that get stuck in a district because of the zip code they're born into.
right, and that's why I was kind of hopeful about the idea, the headline, and it seemed to be the initial idea was that you know. And it does turns out often to be minority groups, but low-income people are kind of fenced in and segregated away from good schools, and perhaps letting them have access to good schools was a good idea, but that wasn't the actual plan, unfortunately.
Right, and that is an area where you have seen probably to the outside observer some of the strangest bedfellows in politics is with the education reform movement. The African American community are very much becoming more and more united with Republicans on the issue of educational choice and freedom. They understand that model works.
And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk further about school reform, because this is something that obviously Tim has been very involved in over the years, and something we're very interested in here at Lindenwood also.
Did you take your medicine?
Oh gosh, I forgot it.
Her nurse,
You need a claim number?
her personal assistant,
Let me just grab a...
her housekeeper, her cook, her accountant. When I started taking care of Mom, I didn't realize the challenge of playing so many roles. But above all, I'm still her daughter.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving to connect with experts and other caregivers. Together we can better care for ourselves and the ones we love.
Listen to me. I am captain of the track team. And if I'm late,
She doesn't really think she's going to get out of here, does she?
Be nice, she's new.
Hello, is anyone there? Ugh!
Wow. Even from our standards, you look awful.
Oh, sweetie, what happened?
Me? My friend Becky got to talk to this super cute boy, and I tried to act like I wasn't jealous, but I so totally was. And then out of nowhere, this concrete barrier just popped up. Maybe it was a semi.
You mean you were driving?
Yeah. I mean, I know the whole eyes on the road thing, but this was a super important text. Maybe you have to know, Becky.
Texting? Great.
But it was only like 5 seconds, and I'm a really, really fast texter, so it wasn't even a big deal. Actually, has she texted me back yet? Wow, I get like no bars in this place. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi here.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Hi, welcome back to Free Exchange. I'm Howard Wall, director of the Hammond Institute, and we're rejoining our discussion with Tim Jones, the outgoing Speaker of the House of the state of Missouri. And I'd like to continue our discussion about education. And
Yes.
if I can kind of frame broadly the two sides of the debate. The side I often hear from the education establishment is that more funding is needed. And there's lots of research showing that funding doesn't matter, and I actually don't believe that entirely, that some schools would benefit from more funding. But it's often said that the funding formula is not correct, or it's not fully funded, and that sometimes they say they want fully funding of the formula, or there's too many words begin with F in there. So that seems to be one side, is more spending, and in particular this funding formula. And then the other side is what you were touching on before the break, which is more competition, more choice. But can you outline this, how the state of Missouri allocates education funding?
Sure, and the argument absolutely breaks down upon those lines. And I'll further elucidate the points you were making, in that it is very correct that the education establishment, and I'll throw everybody in that establishment, from superintendents down to the teachers' unions, they would rather that the state of Missouri, us, the taxpayers, provide them as much funding as possible and more each year, and then not have anything to say about it. Well, I think that would be shirking our duty and responsibility as taxpayers and as elected representatives and senators, because there needs to be some accountability over the nearly $8 billion that goes in to our public education system here in the state of Missouri. And the other side of that is that accountability. And if money were the only thing we needed to do to throw at the problem, then the city of St. Louis schools should be performing phenomenally. The numbers are there, and the folks in the education system often don't like to talk about these numbers, but in the city of St. Louis, it takes approximately $17,000 to educate a child on an annual basis. Out in the Rockwood School District, where I am very blessed to live, the children out there who are national merit scholars and going to all sorts of great colleges and great careers, it only takes about $8,000, less than half. It's because they have great teachers and they have great curriculum. So the funding is definitely, there's a great disparity there, and more money definitely does not lead automatically to better results. The funding formula, Howard, we probably need you to do an entire seminar on that as an economist, and good luck to you. It is a very complicated, it's called the foundation formula. It's commonly called the foundation formula. It is meant to take the $8 billion of taxpayer money and distribute it statewide to those 522 school districts I mentioned. You can imagine how complicated that gets.
And this is just the state portion of the money, not the locally
that is
collected
correct.
tax money.
In fact, here in the St. Louis, St. Charles region, we receive very little state funding, but we're some of the largest givers to the state coffers. So there's a bit of a fairness question that always comes up there. We give, St. Louis, St. Charles are often described by everyone as the economic engine of the state. Why is that? There's the most economic output here and activity. We send the most taxes. I believe we supply 40+% of the revenues every year to the state of Missouri. That goes into the giant state revenue pool, and then the appropriators, the legislature, along with the governor, send that back out. And a third of that money, the state budget this year is $27 billion, billion with a B, and out of that, about a third of it goes to public education, K through 12 and higher ed. So that's a very complicated series of algorithms that are the foundation formula. I couldn't exactly explain it to you in any terms anyone would necessarily understand, including myself. It has not been reformed in about 10 years. It's about ripe for a second look.
Now, on the face of it, its purpose is to be redistribution.
Correct.
Where it's, if you have a local tax base that doesn't collect very much money, you're in a low-income area, then the state will give you more money than would a well-off area, which
True.
You can start up. So, okay, that's why you want some...
Trying to put some balance.
Get some balance and get some minimum level of funding at least. But it's become much more than that. That seems simpler.
Turf war is what it's become. It's become an absolute turf war, because here in St. Louis County, St. Charles County, we fund our schools also largely on property taxes. So local people are funding local schools. The tax base is argued that it does not exist in the more rural areas, but there's a lot of underlying issues there. Here in our region, people believe there's a more proper accounting of real estate transactions with certificates of value that are filed. Some rural, I'm not going to broad brush rural counties. Some of them are very good. Some of their assessors are excellent and do have accurate reads. Some could be better. But in the rural areas, they're not required to file certificates of value with real estate transactions.
Oh, okay.
So you're not always sure if if the fair market value is being properly reported or not.
Oh,
So
now that's something I hadn't heard.
that's an issue for another day for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes. So much goes into the decision-making process and how to take that $8 billion and redistribute it back out to 522 school districts. And the foundation formula is designed to try and create some fairness overall so rural schools can receive some kind of base level amount of funding so they can give a proper education. But as we've discussed, money's not always the answer. And if money were the answer, then the St. Louis City Public Schools and the Jackson County Public Schools, which have been provisionally accredited or unaccredited for 40 years, wouldn't be so. They should be doing gangbusters because they're receiving the highest amounts of funding in the state.
Right, and there are some other smaller school districts or outside the city where the funding is actually alarmingly low.
Yes.
There were some places that in recent years were running on $4,000 or $5,000 per student. So you can see some equalization issues around there. But like you say, I also live in the Rockwood School District, and although we spend so little, we still refuse to spend more. It's very tough to get a bond issue passed.
Yes, we're very
in
thrifty.
Rockwood.
Correct.
But the schools seem perfectly fine. They're well kept,
And the teachers
are very
want
good.
to teach there. Yes, I mean, there's
Right.
always this talk about, oh, we have to make sure that we pay. Well, let me tell you, there's more, as you know, as most people will agree, there's more to a career than a paycheck, and I think the atmosphere in Rockwood, the ability to advance yourself, I think the pay is very competitive, but just the perks I think that come with the job of teaching in one of the best school districts in the state are also very attractive.
Now, the flip side of this, someone could argue that, well, in the city there are all different problems that out in Rockwood School District that you don't have. So it costs more to do that. And I could see there's some amount of spending that might come up, have to handle special problems. But it really comes down to the quality of the teachers.
Yes.
And also that money is not a substitute for those problems.
Right.
If you have problems of crime in the schools, or the kids are not, they're not coming from two-parent homes, all of these social issues, giving more money to the schools is not solving that.
No, it does not.
It's a completely separate issue, and you do want to address those other problems, and it makes that job more difficult, but pouring more money into the schools doesn't seem to me to be the solution.
Not at all. And that's
maybe
right.
more money somewhere,
Right.
but certainly
And that's
not
where
to the
education
schools.
reform comes in. That's where education reform comes in, because these children shouldn't be mired in the circle of defeat that occurs in these districts. And this taxpayer money belongs to the entire state, all of the taxpayers. So why should kids have to be stuck in a district? Why shouldn't those parents the parents who want to have a better future for their children, more opportunity, things like open enrollment, things like even the word that we're not supposed to say, vouchers, how about some teacher tenure reform? We've been doing the same thing for 40 plus years in the city of St. Louis public schools, and nothing has changed. Guess why? We haven't changed anything. The teachers unions, the administrative bureaucracies, they fight any change whatsoever. And now you're seeing leaders in the black community join with Republicans to push for more school choice, which I think is a good thing for the future.
Well, so the city of St. Louis is an interesting case in many ways for education reform, because charter schools are now getting a foothold, and the mayor of St. Louis has been a strong proponent of charters.
Yes.
But he doesn't control the school district itself.
He does not.
But correct me if I'm wrong, maybe they've changed the law, but it was not possible, although there are empty school buildings all over the city of St. Louis because the district has shrunk, they are unable to rent those out to charter schools.
Yes, another constant battle. I mean, we're hitting on all the problems, and we've actually proposed solutions. It's just we can't seem to get them completely through the legislature because the unions, the superintendents associations, they're still very powerful. But the problems with the city are, you have a family structure problem, but you also have an administrative bureaucracy problem. You can't get rid of bad teachers, another problem. You can't give parents choice to go to a neighboring school district right next door in St. Louis County to allow your child the chance at a better education. All these things get pushed back on. It's like it's time to try something new. Other states have done these things, and they've seen remarkable positive results.
Well, and you mentioned just going to neighboring school districts. I'm not sure if you live out in Eureka, if Eureka High School gets a lot of kids from the city, but where my kids go to school, Marquette High School, we have a significant number of kids from the city of St. Louis who bus out or take taxis out in a voluntary DSEG program.
That was the DSEG program from the 70s.
And these kids go through all that effort, and their family goes through all that effort to give their kids a chance. And I've been a proponent of Rockwood expanding that program, just as, because I see these kids thriving.
I have as well. Unfortunately, the DSEG case from the late 70s is starting to wind down. And so over the years, unless something changes, you're going to see less and less of those kids have that opportunity. That's another thing that the teachers' unions and the bureaucracies in education don't want to talk about is the DSEG program, although it was built upon a lot of racial conflicts, it was successful, as we've seen now. Taking those kids out of that environment of despair and allowing them to go to a district like Parkway, like Rockwood, like the Clayton schools, so many of those kids then have the opportunity to succeed. Why can't we expand upon that program? Everyone wants to, in the education establishment, wants to put their blinders on and pretend that program doesn't exist.
Right. No, and it's like you say, it's been a huge success, and certainly should give enough evidence that maybe this is a route out
something
there.
To try,
something to give a shot.
Right.
Since things have failed up to this point. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Tim. It's
Thank
been
you.
great talking to you, and we look forward to you joining us in January.
I look forward to it as well.
Okay, this has been Free Exchange, and I'm Howard Wall, the director of the Hammond Institute. And to look at all the things we've been up to, go to our website on the Lindenwood website, or just Google Hammond Institute at Lindenwood, and you'll find all the great things we've been up to. Thanks.